I discovered my secret daughter and a dark family legacy, and it changed everything. Reddit stories. My brother's secret child. The hidden family no one knew. Before I begin, you have to promise me something. You can't tell anyone about this, not yet anyway. I've held on to this secret so long, it's become a part of me, like a shadow trailing me every waking moment. You're the first person I'm sharing this with, and believe me, this isn't easy. Sometimes secrets, especially family ones, are the heaviest of burdens. But this one changes everything. It started innocently enough, just another regular Sunday afternoon at my parents' house. Sunlight draping lazily through the blinds, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the faint aroma of cinnamon coffee. Mom was humming softly to herself in the kitchen, and Dad had fallen asleep on the couch, remote-controlled, precariously balanced on his chest. Everything felt normal, almost painfully mundane. If you'd told me that day how drastically my life would shift, I'd have laughed right in your face. It was my brother, Jake, who'd always seemed the most uncomplicated person I knew. Dependable, sensible, predictable. Married young to a girl from our neighborhood, 2 kids, stable job. He was the golden boy, the favorite in a subtle way that my parents never openly admitted, but didn't exactly deny either. He was everything they'd hoped for, and honestly, I envied him for how effortlessly he fit into our parents' vision of a perfect family. That afternoon, Jake and I were supposed to clear out some boxes from the attic. Dad had been nagging about it for weeks, complaining that the clutter was going to collapse through the ceiling and kill us all. As we rummaged through piles of forgotten memories, old toys, dusty photo albums, yellowed letters, Jake stumbled upon a small, sealed envelope tucked away behind a box labeled Christmas decorations. He joked about finding buried treasure, waving it around theatrically. But his smile faltered when he saw his name written neatly in unfamiliar handwriting across the envelope. Something about that handwriting made the air around us grow tense. Jake's fingers hesitated, shaking slightly as he tore the envelope open. I watched his face shift from curiosity to confusion, then to something close to shock. He folded the letter back hastily, tucking it into his pocket without a word, avoiding my eyes. But I saw enough to know it wasn't good. The confident older brother I'd always known suddenly seemed like a stranger, haunted and distant. Days passed, and Jake grew more withdrawn. Every conversation felt like it drained him, every laugh forced and hollow. Eventually, unable to ignore his strange behavior, I confronted him at a family gathering, pulling him aside while the kids shrieked with laughter in the backyard and Mom fussed over her famous potato salad. At first, he resisted, insisting everything was fine, that I was imagining things. But something broke in him when I pressed further, a crack in his usually stoic facade. He handed me the letter wordlessly, eyes pleading for understanding, for reassurance. My hands trembled as I unfolded the fragile paper, the words striking me like icy darts. Jake, I know it's been years, and you probably never wanted to hear from me again. But your daughter Emma deserves to know her father. Please, if you have any decency left, reach out. But my heart nearly stopped. Jake, a daughter, it seemed impossible. Emma, who was this Emma, and why hadn't Jake mentioned anything about her? His entire life had always appeared picture perfect. Wife, kids, stable job. But this letter unraveled everything, exposing hidden truths I couldn't even begin to comprehend. When I looked up from the letter, Jake was pale, his face drained of color, eyes haunted by something far darker than guilt. In that moment, my brother's entire image shattered into 1,000 pieces. The man I idolized as the epitome of stability had kept a secret so profound it altered my perception of him completely. Jake confessed quietly that, before he met his wife, he'd briefly dated someone during a semester abroad. Lena, a fiery, independent woman who'd captivated him but left just as suddenly as she'd appeared. They parted on good terms, but Jake had never thought much of it afterward. Until now, apparently, Lena discovered she was pregnant soon after returning home, but chose to raise the child alone. Jake never knew about Emma until the letter arrived. Lena was terminally ill now, desperate for Emma to connect with her father before it was too late. Jake's voice shook as he explained everything, desperation mixed with deep, unbearable shame. He begged me not to tell our parents yet, terrified of the damage it would cause to his marriage and family life. But he also couldn't ignore this sudden, undeniable truth. He had another child out there, a daughter who'd grown up without knowing him, without his support or love. I promised Jake I'd help him navigate the impossible situation, that we'd figure something out together. But inside, I felt betrayed, hurt that he'd hidden something so significant. As days turned into weeks, Jake began secretly communicating with Lena, arranging a discreet visit. He asked me to join him, needing moral support as he faced the daughter he'd never met, the woman he'd left behind. Reluctantly, I agreed, feeling like I was complicit in a betrayal I never asked for. We traveled to a quiet town far from home, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business but pretended not to. Lena lived in a modest cottage on the outskirts, surrounded by overgrown gardens and fading memories. Seeing her for the first time felt surreal. Her face, worn from illness, still held traces of the vibrant young woman Jake described. But it was Emma who struck me most profoundly. 16 years old, a perfect blend of Lena's determination and Jake's unmistakable eyes, deep and searching, already wiser than her age allowed. Jake and Emma's meeting was raw, painful, and beautiful in a strange way. They spoke hesitantly at first, each word weighed carefully, as if afraid the wrong one might shatter the fragile bond forming between them. I watched quietly, feeling like an intruder in their intimate moment. Emma was guarded, suspicious even, yet underneath her cautious exterior was a clear yearning for connection, a hunger for answers and understanding. Jake promised he'd find a way to integrate her into his life, but even as he spoke, doubt flickered behind his eyes, uncertainty clouding his every promise. Returning home felt wrong, like stepping back into a false reality where this other life didn't exist. Jake struggled daily, torn between his family's stability and the truth he owed Emma. His wife grew suspicious, sensing something had shifted dramatically. He denied her every accusation, every suspicion, yet the guilt ate at him visibly, eroding the confident, stable brother I'd always known. Weeks later, Jake confided in me once again, telling me he intended to reveal everything to his wife. I encouraged him, believing honesty was the only path forward. But that same evening, as I prepared for bed, a phone call shattered any remaining hope I had of things resolving peacefully. It was Lena, her voice trembling and filled with panic. Emma had run away, leaving a note saying she couldn't wait for her father anymore, couldn't handle being hidden away like a secret. Jake was beside himself, consumed by fear, guilt, and an overwhelming helplessness I'd never seen in him. Together, we searched desperately for Emma, retracing her steps, begging the police for assistance. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of Emma's disappearance grew unbearable. Jake's carefully built life unraveled piece by piece, his wife finally discovering his secret through the chaos. She left him immediately, taking their children and leaving Jake a broken shell, haunted by regret. But the real twist, the part I never anticipated, came later. One quiet evening, exhausted from endless searching, Jake received a mysterious text message. It contained only an address and a single line. "Come alone if you ever want to see Emma again." Terrified, Jake went, ignoring my frantic warnings. Hours passed without word. Eventually, the police found him, alone, unconscious, left on a roadside with no memory of what happened. Emma was nowhere to be found, vanished as if she'd never existed. That's why I'm telling you now. Emma was real. She mattered. But someone, somewhere, is determined to make us believe otherwise. And the worst part, I think Jake knows exactly who. I know this sounds completely insane. Believe me, if I were you, I'd be skeptical too. But I swear to you every word is true, and it's tearing my family apart piece by piece. What started as a hidden secret, my brother Jake's daughter, Emma, has escalated into something darker, more terrifying than I ever imagined. Now it's become clear that there's more to this story than just a runaway teenager or a forgotten love affair. Something sinister lurks beneath the surface, pulling strings we didn't even know existed, and Jake is at the center of it all. After Jake was found unconscious by the side of the road, things rapidly spiraled out of control. He recovered physically, but mentally he was a shattered man, hollow-eyed and paranoid. When I visited him at the hospital, his vacant stare frightened me more than any tangible threat ever could. He was convinced someone powerful was orchestrating everything, silencing Emma's existence as if she were merely a phantom. The authorities were dismissive, chalking up Jake's claims to trauma-induced paranoia, but deep inside, I felt Jake's fear was more than justified. Something was terribly wrong. Jake's life unraveled completely after that incident. His wife, devastated by the revelation of his secret daughter and the chaos surrounding Emma's disappearance, filed for divorce swiftly. Custody battles ensued, and Jake, already mentally fragile, crumbled under the pressure. He lost his job, spiraled into isolation, and began obsessively researching conspiracies, convinced there was a deeper plot involving Emma's disappearance. I tried reaching out, offering support, desperate to ground him back into reality, but each attempt felt like trying to grab smoke. He slipped further away, disappearing behind walls of mistrust and delusion. Yet through all his paranoia, Jake discovered unsettling truths, hidden connections that even I couldn't ignore. He showed me records, photographs, even intercepted emails, all pointing toward a powerful local businessman named Richard Caldwell. Jake insisted Caldwell was behind Emma's disappearance, claiming Caldwell had ties to Lena's past, connections she'd never mentioned. At first, I dismissed his theory as desperation, but as I sifted through his findings, something resonated deep within my gut. The clues were vague but undeniable. Cryptic references to payments, mysterious meetings, and documents referencing Lena's medical treatments paid anonymously from Caldwell's accounts. It was bizarre, but undeniably real. Determined to uncover the truth, I confronted Lena directly, hoping she would finally shed light on the tangled web my brother was trapped in. But Lena was evasive, terrified even. Her health had deteriorated drastically, her eyes sunken and fearful. When pressed about Caldwell, Lena's reaction was visceral. She begged me to leave immediately, whispering urgently that some secrets were better left buried. The fear in her voice haunted me long after I left, making it clear Lena knew more than she dared reveal. Days after my visit, Lena disappeared without a trace. Neighbors reported seeing suspicious vehicles near her home, men in dark suits with unmarked vans. The police investigation stalled almost immediately, their interest disturbingly minimal. It felt like someone was actively suppressing information, deliberately burying any trace of Lena and Emma. Jake's theories no longer seemed far-fetched. Instead, they took on an alarming credibility. Whoever was behind this had enormous influence and resources, far beyond anything we'd ever encountered. Feeling desperate, I began quietly investigating Caldwell myself, driven by the need to save whatever remained of Jake's sanity. The deeper I dug, the more disturbing the revelations became. Caldwell wasn't just a wealthy entrepreneur, he was deeply embedded in local politics, influential charities, even law enforcement. He'd constructed an impeccable public image, nearly untouchable. But beneath that veneer lurked corruption, coercion, and a frightening capacity for manipulation. I managed to track down an ex-employee of Caldwell's, a woman named Sandra who reluctantly agreed to speak anonymously. Her story chilled me to the core. Sandra claimed Caldwell frequently used his influence to silence problems discreetly. When I mentioned Lena and Emma, Sandra visibly paled, whispering that Lena had once worked for Caldwell years earlier, before abruptly leaving town under suspicious circumstances. Sandra hinted that Lena had discovered something damning, something Caldwell wanted buried forever. With growing dread, I pieced together the puzzle. Lena hadn't left Jake willingly. She'd fled to protect herself and Emma. Jake's past relationship wasn't merely a brief romance. It was tangled in secrets Caldwell was desperate to conceal. Emma unwittingly became leverage, a pawn Caldwell intended to silence or control. and now Emma had disappeared again. Lena silenced, and Jake systematically discredited, painted as delusional, unreliable, and unstable. Caldwell had crafted a narrative that erased any trace of his involvement, leaving only shadows and suspicion. But there was something Caldwell hadn't anticipated: Jake's determination and my unwillingness to give up on the truth. As the weeks passed, Jake, fueled by a newfound resolve, gathered enough evidence to expose Caldwell's hidden empire. Records of illegal financial transactions, shady property deals, even evidence tying Caldwell directly to Emma's disappearance. Together we planned meticulously, knowing that a misstep could mean our destruction. Jake was determined to reclaim his life, to find Emma, to expose Caldwell's crimes no matter the personal cost. However, as we prepared to reveal everything, Caldwell struck first, ruthlessly efficient and terrifyingly precise. One night, Jake's apartment was broken into, his carefully collected evidence stolen, his computer wiped clean. A threat was left behind, a single note: "Keep digging, and you'll lose everything." But Jake wouldn't be deterred. Desperation made him reckless, determined to confront Caldwell directly, convinced it was the only way to stop the nightmare. He disappeared that same night, leaving me frantic, terrified of losing my brother completely. I searched everywhere, desperate and terrified, until a late-night call jolted me awake. It was Jake, voice strained, whispering urgently. He'd been captured, held somewhere he couldn't identify clearly. But the call disconnected abruptly, replaced by static silence. I rushed to authorities, demanding action, but once again doors closed in my face. Caldwell's power was evident, frighteningly real. Then, unexpectedly, Caldwell himself reached out, requesting a private meeting under the guise of clearing the air. Every instinct screamed that it was a trap, but refusing meant losing any chance of rescuing Jake and uncovering the truth. Reluctantly, I agreed, knowing I was walking into danger. We met in a sterile conference room, surrounded by imposing men who said nothing but watched everything. Caldwell appeared relaxed, charismatic, yet there was an undeniable menace lurking behind his smile. He calmly explained his position. Jake had become delusional, dangerous, and unstable, creating elaborate conspiracies to justify his own failures. Caldwell played his role perfectly, attempting to gaslight me into believing Jake was indeed mentally unhinged, even producing falsified psychiatric evaluations supporting his claims. When I confronted Caldwell with the truth, Lena, the hidden payments. His veneer cracked slightly, anger flickering briefly in his eyes. He leaned forward, voice low and dangerous, warning that continued pursuit would have irreversible consequences. But his threat confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Caldwell was terrified of exposure, desperate to keep the truth hidden at any cost. As I left, shaken but determined, I received an anonymous text message. "Don't trust anyone. Meet me at the old docks tonight." Driven by desperation and faint hope, I arrived at the darkened pier, heart pounding. Out of the shadows stepped Lena, alive but fragile, her voice trembling. She explained quickly. Emma had discovered Caldwell's darkest secret, evidence of crimes far worse than financial corruption. Caldwell had abducted Emma to silence her forever. Lena, barely escaping herself, begged for my help to rescue Emma and Jake before it was too late. Together, we formed a risky plan, knowing it was our only chance. But as we approached Caldwell's hidden compound, my heart sank. A sea of flashing lights and sirens erupted around us. The authorities had already arrived, yet the relief quickly turned to dread as officers surrounded us, weapons drawn. Caldwell emerged calmly from the chaos, smiling coldly. His final words echoed chillingly. "I warned you. No one would believe you." And that's when I realized Caldwell's reach extended far beyond anything we'd imagined. The authorities weren't there to stop Caldwell. They were there to stop us. The real nightmare was only just beginning. I wish I could say this was just a bad dream, that I'd wake up soon and everything would go back to normal. But reality, I'm learning, is harsher than any nightmare. The moment those officers surrounded Lena and me, guns pointed, eyes cold and distant, I knew we'd underestimated Richard Caldwell terribly. He wasn't just influential. He controlled everything around us. The police, the politicians, even the media. He'd built an impenetrable fortress of lies and manipulation, and now we were trapped inside it, helpless and completely isolated. They arrested us swiftly, spinning a narrative so convincing it made headlines overnight. Lena was painted as mentally unstable, accused of kidnapping Emma in a fit of deranged jealousy. I became her accomplice, manipulated by familial loyalty and blinded by misplaced trust in my brother Jake, whom the press labeled a delusional conspiracy theorist suffering from severe psychological breakdown. Caldwell, of course, was cast as the innocent victim, his reputation spotless, his public image strengthened by his apparent grace under pressure. Watching his smug face on TV made my blood boil, but behind bars, anger meant nothing. We needed proof, undeniable evidence, or we would lose everything forever. As Lena and I sat confined separately, hope dwindling, I knew Jake was still out there. Alone, hunted, desperately fighting a war no one else could see. The authorities interrogated me relentlessly, pressuring me to betray my brother, to admit to false accusations that would further their twisted narrative. I resisted fiercely, clinging to the slim hope that Jake would somehow break through Caldwell's impenetrable web and free us all. But days turned into weeks, and the isolation slowly began eroding my resolve. Then one evening, a familiar face appeared at my cell door. Detective Morgan, an officer I'd met briefly during Emma's initial disappearance. Unlike the others, Morgan seemed hesitant, conflicted, uncomfortable in his own skin. Something in his eyes made me cautiously hopeful, sensing he might not fully be Caldwell's puppet. Quietly, carefully, Morgan slipped me a folded note through the bars, urging silence with his finger pressed urgently to his lips. Later, alone in my dimly lit cell, my heart raced as I unfolded the message. Jake is alive. Trust no one here. Wait for instructions. Those few words ignited a spark of determination in me, rekindling hope I feared I'd lost. Jake hadn't given up, hadn't surrendered to Caldwell's manipulations. He was still fighting, risking everything, and I owed it to him, to Emma, to hold on, to survive this ordeal, no matter how unbearable it became. Days later, Detective Morgan reappeared, this time pulling me aside under the guise of another interrogation. Once safely out of earshot, he spoke quietly, hurriedly explaining the truth behind his actions. Morgan admitted he'd initially believed Caldwell's lies, like everyone else. But gradually, doubts surfaced, inconsistencies in official reports nagging at him. Investigating secretly, he'd stumbled upon evidence linking Caldwell to a string of suspicious disappearances. People had crossed paths with Caldwell and conveniently vanished. Morgan's voice shook as he revealed something even more chilling. Emma had been taken by Caldwell's men and hidden in an undisclosed facility, heavily guarded and off limits to standard police investigation. Morgan handed me a burner phone discreetly, instructing me to await Jake's call. The plan, he explained, hinged entirely on timing and secrecy. One mistake, one hint of suspicion, and Caldwell would bury all traces, silencing everyone involved. It was risky, terrifyingly fragile, yet it was the only chance we had. The call finally came at midnight, the voice on the other end raw and exhausted. Jake spoke quickly, outlining his desperate plan. He'd spent weeks hiding, piecing together fragments of evidence, and locating Emma through cryptic clues left by anonymous insiders. People equally terrified of Caldwell's power, but finally willing to help from the shadows. Jake had discovered Emma's whereabouts, an isolated estate, heavily fortified, secured like a military base, owned by a shell company linked directly to Caldwell. Emma was alive, but her situation was dire, escape seemed almost impossible. Yet Jake refused to back down, determination burning fiercely in every whispered word. The plan involved multiple coordinated steps. Morgan would help Lena and me escape custody, meeting Jake at a hidden location before approaching Emma's prison. The risks were immense, but the alternative, losing Emma, surrendering Jake, submitting to Caldwell's tyranny, was far worse. Every cell in my body trembled as I listened, but my resolve grew stronger. We were committed now, no turning back. The following night, adrenaline surging, Morgan executed the first stage flawlessly. Lena and I slipped silently from custody, disguises masking our identities, hearts hammering with each footstep toward freedom. Outside, under the cover of darkness, Jake waited anxiously. Disheveled, pale, barely recognizable, yet fiercely determined. Seeing him again filled me with overwhelming relief, tempered by the looming threat of our mission ahead. Together, we traveled cautiously to Caldwell's compound, each mile heavier with tension. Arriving near the estate's perimeter, concealed by shadows, we surveyed the imposing fortress. Guards patrolled constantly, surveillance cameras capturing every movement. It seemed impossible, suicidal even. But Jake revealed a surprising ally. Sandra, Caldwell's former assistant, who knew the facility's vulnerabilities intimately. Sandra emerged quietly, her face taut with anxiety, but eyes blazing with defiance. She'd risked everything to meet us, determined to redeem herself by helping end Caldwell's nightmare once and for all. Sandra guided us expertly through hidden tunnels beneath the compound, intricate passages Caldwell arrogantly believed only he controlled. My pulse quickened as we moved silently, breaths shallow, every sound magnified in the tense silence. Eventually, we emerged inside the main building, directly below the secured area where Emma was supposedly held. But as we ascended toward Emma's location, alarms erupted violently, red lights flooding hallways, panic gripping us instantly. Caldwell had anticipated our arrival, laying a trap we foolishly triggered. Guards rushed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands aggressively. Cornered and helpless, our capture seemed inevitable until Jake did something unexpected, terrifyingly bold. He surged forward, tackling the nearest guard, sacrificing himself to buy us time. Chaos erupted instantly. Morgan and Sandra fighting desperately, Lena screaming in anguish, and me frozen in horror, unable to move as Jake vanished beneath a crush of angry guards. It felt hopeless until suddenly, amidst the confusion, Emma appeared. A ghost-like figure, weak yet defiant, having used the distraction Jake created to escape her cell. With strength born from desperation, Emma led us quickly to a hidden staircase, escaping the chaos momentarily. Outside, gunshots echoed, alarms blared, and Jake remained trapped within, fate uncertain. We fled blindly into the night, Emma shaking violently, Lena sobbing uncontrollably, and Morgan, pale and wounded but still fighting, urging us forward. My mind screamed to return, desperate to save Jake, but survival demanded we keep moving. We reached temporary safety. Collapsing in exhaustion, hearts shattered, knowing we'd left Jake behind, uncertain if he'd survived the brutal confrontation. Hours passed painfully, silence deafening, until Morgan's phone buzzed, a call from a blocked number. Jake's voice, weak but alive, filled us with indescribable relief. Captured but still defiant, Jake reassured us Caldwell wouldn't kill him. Yet, Jake had something Caldwell desperately needed, evidence hidden securely, powerful enough to destroy Caldwell entirely. And negotiations were inevitable, buying us crucial time. In hiding, regrouping, we plotted carefully. Emma's recovery was slow, haunted by trauma but driven by anger, determined to help dismantle Caldwell's empire. Sandra's insider knowledge became invaluable, guiding our next steps strategically. Caldwell had weakened slightly, his arrogance exposing vulnerabilities we could exploit. But just as hope resurfaced, Emma revealed something shocking, a truth she'd uncovered during her captivity. Caldwell wasn't her enemy, he was her biological father. Lena had hidden this truth, trying to protect Emma from Caldwell's sinister legacy. The revelation stunned us all, complicating our fight immensely. Emma, torn by confusion and grief, now faced an unimaginable choice. Betray Caldwell, destroying the father she'd never known, or accept his twisted offer of freedom in exchange for silence, abandoning Jake to an unknown fate. With our mission teetering precariously, betrayal and loyalty blurred terrifyingly. Caldwell's empire wasn't built on power alone. It thrived on secrets, manipulation, and the brutal exploitation of trust. Now, in the battle against Caldwell, trust itself became our most dangerous enemy, threatening to tear us apart before we could defeat him. If I've learned anything from this horrific journey, it's that trust is dangerously fragile, something that can shatter instantly when secrets explode into the open. And the revelation about Emma, that Richard Caldwell was her true father, shook our small band of rebels to the core. Suddenly, the clarity of our mission dissolved into an unbearable haze. Emma herself became a walking paradox, both victim and potential betrayer, caught between loyalty to the man who raised her briefly, Jake, and the biological father who represented darkness, power, and a twisted kind of salvation. The stakes had never felt so painfully high. Emma spent days in anguished silence, withdrawn and unreachable, as we remained hidden in a rundown farmhouse far outside town. Detective Morgan's wounds slowly healed, Lena regained some strength, and Sandra kept watch, her eyes haunted by anxiety. Meanwhile, every day we waited, Jake remained Caldwell's prisoner, an agonizing uncertainty gnawing at each of us. Caldwell had yet to negotiate openly, maintaining unbearable silence. A silence meant to torment, to break us emotionally before he struck again. Then, abruptly, Caldwell's silence ended. A private courier arrived late one evening with a sealed envelope addressed specifically to Emma. Her fingers trembled violently as she unfolded the single sheet of paper, eyes darting frantically across the carefully typed message. Caldwell was ruthless yet calculated, offering Emma a choice that chilled our blood. She could join him willingly, publicly acknowledge him as her father, and in return, Jake would be freed unharmed. Refusal, however, meant Jake would disappear permanently, erased as easily as all Caldwell's other problems. The note ended simply, ominously. Family matters more than anything, Emma. Choose wisely. The room fell deathly silent, Emma's anguished sobs echoing softly. Lena reached for her daughter, desperate to offer comfort, but Emma pulled away sharply, anger mixing violently with confusion. I felt helpless, terrified of the decision Emma was being forced to make. Caldwell had masterfully turned family loyalty into a weapon, manipulating Emma's raw emotional wounds mercilessly. As Emma retreated further, isolating herself from everyone, our fragile alliance cracked beneath the pressure. Lena blamed herself for years of deception, Sandra questioned the risks she'd taken, and Morgan agonized over his betrayal of the very system he'd sworn to uphold. Yet through it all, we knew one thing clearly. Time was running out for Jake, and Emma's decision held his life in the balance. In desperation, I finally confronted Emma, pleading with her to trust us, to resist Caldwell's twisted manipulation. Her eyes flashed with bitterness and betrayal, voice shaking as she unleashed years of bottled resentment. Emma accused Lena of lying her entire life, me of treating her existence as a problem to solve rather than a human being, and Jake of selfishly using her to justify his crusade against Caldwell. Her words pierced deeply, exposing painful truths we'd ignored in our singular pursuit of justice. Despite my protests, Emma stormed off, vanishing into the night, leaving behind an unbearable silence that echoed with heartbreak. We searched frantically, panic rising with each passing hour, until Sandra returned, pale-faced and shaking. Emma had been spotted entering Caldwell's headquarters willingly, escorted inside like an honored guest. The betrayal was devastatingly complete. Emma had chosen Caldwell, sacrificing Jake to protect herself from further pain. Lena crumbled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, overcome by guilt and despair. Morgan slumped silently, staring blankly, realizing we'd lost our only leverage against Caldwell. I felt numb, hollowed out by grief and disbelief, incapable of comprehending Emma's decision. But in the chaos of despair, a tiny spark remained. Jake's hidden evidence against Caldwell, secured somewhere Caldwell hadn't found. If we retrieved it quickly enough, we could still stop him, expose his empire, and free Jake. Fueled by determination and rage, we raced to Jake's old apartment, desperate to uncover the hidden cache before Caldwell's men found it. The apartment had been thoroughly trashed. Furniture overturned, walls ripped apart, Jake's life systematically dismantled. Yet somehow, in the debris, I noticed something out of place. Jake's prized baseball trophy, strangely intact, untouched amidst the wreckage. Acting on intuition, I smashed the trophy open, revealing a tiny USB drive hidden cleverly inside. With the evidence in hand, hope surged anew. Sandra, using her old access codes, decrypted the drive's contents rapidly. The evidence was explosive financial transactions detailing bribery, political manipulation, documents confirming Caldwell's direct involvement in multiple disappearances, and, most chillingly, proof that Caldwell had orchestrated Emma's abduction personally, staging everything to discredit Jake completely. We knew immediate action was critical. Any delay risked losing Jake forever. Morgan used his remaining contacts discreetly, contacting a trusted journalist, setting in motion a dangerous game of revelation and retaliation. Within hours, details of Caldwell's sinister empire leaked publicly, spreading virally, igniting fury and outrage. Authorities loyal to Caldwell panicked, scrambling chaotically to suppress the truth, but the sheer scale of evidence overwhelmed them rapidly. Amid the mounting chaos, Caldwell's fortress cracked. Emma reached out secretly, her voice trembling with fear. Caldwell had become erratic, unpredictable, blaming her fiercely for his crumbling control. He'd threatened to harm Jake immediately unless she publicly denied all claims against him. Terrified, she begged forgiveness, desperate for help escaping Caldwell's suffocating grip. Realizing this was our final chance, Morgan, Sandra, Lena, and I launched a daring rescue operation, infiltrating Caldwell's compound under cover of darkness. Security had weakened, guards distracted by the unfolding public scandal. Moving quickly, hearts pounding violently, we located Emma, shaken but unharmed. She led us swiftly to Jake, imprisoned in a stark, windowless room, battered but defiantly resilient, never having surrendered hope we'd rescue him. But before we could celebrate, Caldwell appeared suddenly, eyes wild, face twisted with rage, holding a gun steadily pointed at Emma. He screamed incoherently, blaming her betrayal for his downfall, accusing her of destroying the very family bond he'd used to control everyone around him. Lena stepped bravely between Caldwell and Emma, begging for mercy, offering herself in exchange. Caldwell hesitated, conflicted for a split second, and in that hesitation, Jake lunged fiercely, grappling with Caldwell desperately. The struggle ended violently, a gunshot echoing loudly, leaving Caldwell mortally wounded, collapsing silently, eyes wide with shock. The nightmare seemed finally over. Caldwell's reign destroyed, Jake freed, and Emma safely reunited with Lena. Authorities arrived, no longer under Caldwell's control, bringing relief and the promise of justice. But as we emerged from Caldwell's shadow into the dawn, exhausted yet triumphant, I couldn't shake an unsettling feeling deep within. A nagging suspicion we'd overlooked something critical. Days passed, recovery slow but steady, families mending painfully from wounds inflicted. Jake regained strength gradually, Emma began rebuilding trust cautiously, Lena found peace, and Sandra and Morgan were hailed quietly as heroes. Public outrage against Caldwell's empire triggered widespread investigations, dismantling his network of corruption piece by piece. Yet one evening, as calm finally settled, a mysterious envelope arrived at my doorstep, similar to the one Jake received months before. Hands trembling, I opened it slowly, revealing a single photograph. Grainy recent, showing Caldwell alive, his wound bandaged, standing beside someone shockingly familiar, Detective Morgan, smiling coldly, shaking Caldwell's hand firmly. The note attached read simply, "Did you really think it was over?" My blood froze instantly, heart hammering wildly, realizing with horrifying clarity that we'd all been deceived. Morgan's supposed betrayal of Caldwell had been staged masterfully. A calculated double, cross-ensuring Caldwell escaped justice yet again. Our trust had been weaponized once more, exploited brutally. And now, Caldwell knew precisely how vulnerable we were. The war we'd thought won was only just beginning, and this time, Caldwell's revenge would be merciless. My world collapsed all over again the moment I saw that photo of Detective Morgan shaking hands with Richard Caldwell. The betrayal hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath and filling me with a deep, sickening dread. How could we have been so blind, trusting Morgan implicitly, when he'd been a traitor all along? Caldwell wasn't dead, he'd merely retreated to the shadows, letting us believe we had finally won. The photograph was a chilling declaration that the war wasn't over. It had barely begun. I kept the photograph hidden, afraid to show Jake or Lena, terrified it would shatter their fragile recoveries. But each night, alone in the dark, I stared at the image obsessively, haunted by the cold calculation in Morgan's eyes and Caldwell's triumphant smirk. They'd played us masterfully, manipulating every move, every desperate decision we'd made. Now, more than ever, I understood Caldwell's true power. It wasn't just his influence or wealth. It was his ability to infiltrate trust, poison loyalty, and weaponize family against itself. Days turned to weeks, each passing moment a nerve-wracking torment. Emma slowly settled into a guarded routine, determinedly avoiding the public spotlight. Lena poured herself into therapy, desperately seeking normalcy. Jake began to heal physically, yet his eyes remained distant, wary. He sensed something still lurked in the shadows. My own paranoia grew steadily, jumping at every unexpected sound, convinced Caldwell's men lurked just out of sight, always watching, always waiting. Finally, unable to bear the secret any longer, I confronted Jake privately, revealing the photograph with shaking hands. He stared in disbelief, face draining of color, fists clenching tightly. The pain of Morgan's betrayal carved deep lines into his exhausted features, anger reigniting fiercely in his eyes. Yet, beneath his rage, determination flickered defiantly. Jake wouldn't surrender now, not after everything we'd suffered. He vowed to uncover Caldwell's final plan, expose Morgan's true role, and end this nightmare permanently. Jake and I knew we needed allies, trustworthy ones untouched by Caldwell's influence. Sandra became our lifeline once again. Still wary, haunted by past betrayals, Sandra agreed reluctantly, knowing she was as deeply entangled as we were. Together, we cautiously dug into Morgan's past, carefully unraveling his carefully crafted facade. Piece by piece, we uncovered a disturbing truth: Morgan wasn't merely Caldwell's pawn. He was his longtime protégé, groomed meticulously, placed strategically within law enforcement years ago. Morgan's entire identity was fabricated, his real name, Oliver Reed, buried beneath layers of falsified records. More chillingly, Sandra discovered Reed's connection to Lena. They'd crossed paths years earlier, briefly during Lena's employment at Caldwell's company. Lena, deeply shaken when confronted, admitted reluctantly that she recognized Morgan immediately upon their reunion, but remained silent, terrified he'd expose her own dark past. She revealed, painfully, that she'd been part of Caldwell's inner circle years before, complicit in unethical practices, desperate to protect Emma by fleeing. Caldwell had hunted Lena relentlessly not only for Emma, but because she knew too much. Morgan's involvement had always been calculated, a silent threat Lena never dared acknowledge. With Lena's revelation, the puzzle suddenly fell into place. Morgan had orchestrated every step perfectly, subtly influencing Jake's investigation, guiding us exactly where Caldwell intended, right into his trap. Emma's rescue had been permitted deliberately, a cruel manipulation designed to emotionally devastate Jake, breaking him irrevocably. Morgan's supposed heroism, his staged betrayal of Caldwell, had been meticulously crafted illusions designed to earn unquestioned loyalty, further entrenching Caldwell's hidden control. But why? What final goal justified such elaborate cruelty? Sandra finally uncovered the horrifying truth in Caldwell's deepest, most encrypted files. Morgan, as Reed, was secretly Caldwell's illegitimate son, concealed from public knowledge, raised and trained from birth to inherit Caldwell's empire. Emma had initially been considered a liability, a loose end threatening Morgan's carefully planned ascension. But Caldwell's plans shifted drastically once he realized Emma, being his biological daughter, could publicly legitimize Morgan's claim, consolidating power completely under their family name. Jake had simply been collateral damage, used ruthlessly to bind Emma emotionally to Caldwell's twisted reality. Realizing Caldwell intended Emma to be a puppet figurehead, manipulated relentlessly to legitimize his power, Jake became desperate, frantic to protect Emma from becoming Caldwell's lifelong victim. We raced against time, knowing Caldwell would soon reclaim Emma, permanently this time, crushing any resistance brutally. We decided to confront Morgan directly, forcing Caldwell's hand prematurely, hoping to destabilize their carefully planned timeline. The risk was enormous. Any misstep could mean certain death. Yet Jake's resolve was unshakable. Emma's freedom, her future, mattered above everything. Morgan anticipated our arrival, greeting us calmly in Caldwell's old penthos suite, arrogance radiating confidently. He spoke coolly, dismissively, acknowledging his true identity openly, amused by our attempts at defiance. But Jake remained steady, confronting Morgan fearlessly, challenging his twisted vision of family loyalty. The tension became unbearable, each word sharpened into a deadly weapon, truth slicing painfully through layers of deception. Suddenly, Caldwell emerged from the shadows, visibly older, weakened, but eyes blazing with unquenchable rage. He chastised Morgan sharply, revealing openly that he'd always doubted Morgan's commitment, that Emma, not Morgan, was his true heir. Her purity, innocence, and public sympathy far more useful. Caldwell's revelation stunned Morgan, shattering his carefully built confidence instantly, the betrayal flooding his eyes as he realized he'd been nothing more than a pawn himself, disposable like everyone else. Enraged, Morgan turned violently against Caldwell, the fragile alliance between father and son fracturing dramatically. Chaos erupted, shouts and threats filling the penthouse. Caldwell, ruthless as ever, drew a concealed weapon, aiming coldly at Morgan, prepared to discard his son as ruthlessly as he discarded countless others. But Emma appeared suddenly, standing defiantly between them, courage blazing fiercely in her eyes. Her voice trembled but clear, declaring she'd no longer be Caldwell's puppet, refusing to be used again. Caldwell hesitated briefly, genuinely surprised by her defiance, realizing too late he'd underestimated Emma terribly. Seizing that brief hesitation, Jake lunged forward bravely, wresting the gun from Caldwell's grip. In the violent struggle, a shot echoed, piercing silence suddenly dominating the room. Caldwell staggered backward, wounded fatally, eyes wide in shock. He collapsed heavily, finally defeated by his own twisted ambitions. Morgan, broken emotionally, stared numbly at his dying father, his lifelong indoctrination shattering instantly. Yet, despite his crimes, something human remained. Anguish, grief flickering briefly behind his hardened exterior. We stood silently, shaken profoundly, Caldwell's death an unexpected victory, yet tainted by sadness. Morgan surrendered quietly, accepting his fate without resistance, defeated completely, abandoning all claims to power or legacy. Authorities arrived shortly after, no longer corrupted, bringing a fragile sense of justice finally achieved. Yet even in victory, scars remained deep and lasting. Emma, finally freed, still carried immense emotional wounds, struggling daily to redefine herself beyond Caldwell's manipulation. Lena confronted her past bravely, determinedly moving forward. Jake found peace cautiously, haunted but resilient. Sandra chose to vanish quietly, anonymity her safety, while I grappled constantly with lingering nightmares. But Caldwell's shadow never truly vanished, echoes of his cruelty permanently imprinted. The line between ally and enemy, truth and deception, forever blurred by our experiences. Trust remained a terrifying gamble. Family bonds both our strength and greatest vulnerability. Months passed slowly, normalcy cautiously returning. Yet one quiet evening, alone, I received another envelope, fear gripping instantly. Inside, a single note read chillingly, "You think you've won, but legacies never truly die." My heart froze instantly, realizing with terrifying certainty that Caldwell's empire had deeper roots, secrets yet undiscovered, allies hidden patiently, awaiting their chance. The nightmare wasn't over. It had merely shifted, hidden in darkness, waiting patiently ready to rise again. I never believed evil could be inherited. Passed down like a family heirloom, hidden quietly beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to re-emerge. But Caldwell's ominous message, that chilling note about legacies, convinced me otherwise. Even after his death, his presence lingered, haunting our lives, twisting peace into paranoia. We'd fought so hard, sacrificed everything, only to realize the nightmare was far from finished. Caldwell was gone, but his dark empire remained, rooted deeply, ready to consume us again. In the months following Caldwell's demise, Emma struggled immensely. She'd withdrawn completely. Her nightmares more frequent, her trust in people utterly destroyed. Lena hovered protectively, desperate to rebuild the bond shattered by years of secrets and lies, while Jake tried tirelessly to shield Emma from the shadows still lurking. But it was futile. Caldwell's poison had seeped too deeply, leaving Emma fragile, haunted, and suspicious of everyone, including those closest to her. Jake, consumed by guilt over failing Emma repeatedly, became obsessed with uprooting Caldwell's remaining hidden network, convinced that only total eradication would restore our lives. He spent endless nights scouring financial records, following trails of encrypted files, determinedly seeking unseen allies who'd helped Caldwell maintain control long after his apparent defeat. One evening, Jake called me urgently, voice strained, desperation evident. He'd found something critical. Another hidden account connected to Caldwell, still actively funneling resources, maintaining operations secretly. The true horror, Jake explained breathlessly, was that someone intimately connected to us had recently accessed this account repeatedly, directly benefiting from Caldwell's hidden funds. Jake refused to reveal who until we met face to face, cautioning me repeatedly to trust no one until he could share the truth. We agreed to meet at an isolated cabin Jake had rented secretly, deep in the woods. Driving through the dense forest, anxiety twisting painfully in my gut, I finally reached the isolated cabin at twilight. Jake met me at the door, visibly shaken, his face pale, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He ushered me inside quickly, locking the door securely behind us, pulling blinds shut anxiously. Jake revealed quickly, voice trembling, that he'd traced the account to Lena. She'd been secretly accessing Caldwell's hidden funds for months. My mind refused to accept the idea initially, but Jake laid out undeniable proof. Timestamps, financial records, encrypted messages. Lena, the woman who'd appeared so desperate to escape Caldwell's influence, was secretly financing his legacy, keeping his dark empire alive. We sat in stunned silence, betrayal cutting deep. Lena had deceived us all, skillfully manipulating sympathy, trust, even love, masking her true intentions perfectly. Jake theorized painfully that Lena had never truly escaped Caldwell's control. Her dramatic flight, Emma's upbringing in secret, had all been carefully planned, strategically designed illusions to conceal Lena's deep involvement. Emma had unknowingly been raised as a pawn, prepared meticulously for a role she'd rejected violently, throwing Lena's careful plans into chaos. Our discovery posed immediate danger. Lena would stop at nothing to protect herself, even sacrificing Emma if necessary. Jake and I understood instantly the urgency. Emma's life was at grave risk. Frantically, we raced back toward town, determined to confront Lena before she realized we'd discovered her deception. But Lena was already steps ahead, prepared for confrontation. She awaited us calmly, seated in Emma's bedroom, a cold smile fixed upon her lips. Emma sat beside her silently, eyes wide with fear, clearly understanding the twisted situation she'd once again become trapped in. Lena spoke coolly, almost amused by our shocked expressions, acknowledging her deception openly. She explained her plan coldly. Caldwell had promised immense wealth, power, security, if she successfully prepared Emma for eventual control of his empire. But Emma's rebellion disrupted everything, forcing Lena into extreme measures to regain control. Jake pleaded desperately, begging Lena to release Emma, to abandon Caldwell's toxic legacy completely. But Lena laughed bitterly, revealing chillingly that it was too late. Caldwell's remaining followers were already mobilized, prepared to ensure his final vision became reality. Emma's refusal meant her immediate disposal. Lena planned to erase her completely, blaming us publicly, ensuring Jake and I faced consequences for Emma's tragic demise. In a final desperate move, Emma suddenly lunged toward Lena, wrestling fiercely for control, defiance erupting violently. Chows exploded instantly, shouts echoing, furniture crashing violently, a panic gripping us fiercely. In the struggle, Lena grabbed a concealed weapon, aiming wildly, threatening to end everything immediately. But suddenly, Morgan appeared, shocking everyone. his face pale, expression determined. His apparent betrayal had deeply shaken him, Caldwell's ultimate abandonment leaving scars deeper than any he'd inflicted himself. Morgan tackled Lena bravely, wrestling fiercely, sacrificing himself desperately. A gunshot echoed harshly, silencing chaos immediately. Lena fell backward, mortally wounded, eyes wide in disbelief, finally defeated by her own ruthless ambition. Morgan collapsed, gravely injured but alive, his redemption painfully earned. In the aftermath, silence echoed deafeningly, disbelief consuming us fully. Lena's demise finally ended Caldwell's immediate lineage of evil, leaving behind painful closure but immense emotional devastation. Morgan survived barely, facing inevitable consequences but finally free from Caldwell's influence. Authorities dismantled remaining Caldwell operations rapidly, publicly exposing decades of manipulation, corruption, cruelty. Jake, Emma, and I slowly began recovering, scars permanent but resilience growing steadily. Emma finally felt safe, cautiously hopeful for the future. Months passed gradually, normalcy finally returning tentatively. Yet beneath the fragile peace, unease lingered deeply, paranoia never fully disappearing. Caldwell's empire had profoundly changed us. Trust forever tenuous, shadows always watched suspiciously. Finally, attempting to reclaim some normalcy, Jake, Emma, and I traveled together, far from familiar places, seeking healing desperately. Yet one afternoon, while walking through a busy street market in a remote foreign city, something unexpected caught my eye. A familiar figure, vaguely disguised, watching us carefully, eyes intense, knowingly dangerous. My heart froze instantly. Caldwell himself, undeniably alive, merely vanished temporarily, his supposed demise carefully staged. He disappeared instantly into the crowd, a sinister smile lingering briefly, reminding me chillingly that we'd never truly escape him. Jake saw him too, horror reflected clearly in his face, understanding instantly our nightmare wasn't over. Caldwell had merely allowed us temporary reprieve, a brief illusion of victory, before reclaiming dominance completely. Emma sensed our sudden terror, eyes widening fearfully. Jake's hand trembled violently as he grasped mine tightly, determination reigniting fiercely. We understood clearly our lives remained forever entangled within Caldwell's twisted web, his presence constant, inescapable. Yet Jake refused surrender, determinedly whispering urgently, promising we'd fight again, protecting Emma relentlessly, ensuring Caldwell never reclaimed control fully. Caldwell might continue lurking, watching patiently, manipulating from shadows, but Jake, Emma, and I now knew the truth intimately, strength found finally within solidarity, trust rebuilt carefully, painfully earned. In that crowded foreign street, amidst strangers obliviously bustling, we stood together silently, fearful yet unbroken, accepting Caldwell's chilling presence as constant reality, yet refusing defeat completely. Emma squeezed my hand gently, whispering softly her quiet determination. Her life finally hers alone, free from manipulation forever. And as Jake watched fiercely, protective instinct blazing strongly, I understood clearly. Caldwell's legacy could threaten eternally, his influence infinite, darkness persistent. Yet family bonds, painfully tested, fractured repeatedly, finally rebuilt solidly, formed strength infinitely stronger than Caldwell's cruelty. In that moment, despite constant threat looming silently, hope surged powerfully, understanding finally that Caldwell's twisted empire thrived solely within fear and secrecy. Publicly exposed, actively resisted defiantly, Caldwell's darkness weakened rapidly, unable ever again to control completely. Thus, standing united determinedly, Emma, Jake, and I silently vowed permanently. Whatever challenges loomed ominously, threats persistently shadowed, we'd face courageously, defeating evil resolutely. Caldwell's shadow might persist indefinitely, but our resilience, family bonds, courage eternally surpassed darkness significantly, ensuring Caldwell's eventual final defeat conclusively. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe, and like the video.